and welcome. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. The Ben Shapiro Show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your internet activity today at expressvpn.com/Ben. A horrifying day. The byproduct of the crappiest foreign policy decision of my lifetime, the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan with no plan, with no real understanding of what they were doing, the decision to completely destroy the Afghan military in the process and hand over tons of American hardware to the Taliban, to allow terrorists to rush into Afghanistan, to rush into Kabul, to get rid of Bagram Air Base for no apparent reason other than the vanity of Joe Biden. The decision to withdraw inside the borders of Kabul airport, to not send any expeditionary missions out to go pick up Americans, has now resulted in at least 12 dead Marines. As according to the Washington Free Beacon, at least 12 Marines participating in the Afghanistan evacuation were killed in a terrorist attack at the Kabul airport on Thursday morning, making it the deadliest day in the war since 2011. Jennifer Griffin, national security correspondent for Fox News, said at least 12 service members died in the terror attacks. That attack is now the deadliest in Afghanistan since August 6th, 2011, when 30 Americans, including 22 Navy SEALs, were shot down over Wardak province. The U.S. ambassador in Kabul told staff of the casualties after terrorists set off 2 suicide bombs outside of the airport, as well as at the Baron Hotel in the Afghan capital, where a bunch of Americans were staying. Again, this was not utterly unexpected. The State Department had warned earlier today that people should stay away from the gates because they were getting information that ISIS was going to perform some sort of terrorist attack. The Wall Street Journal confirmed the deaths of the U.S. troops. The bombing is the second deadliest day in the war in Afghanistan since 2005, when 19 special ops forces died during Operation Red Wings. These are the first combat deaths. This is the stat that matters. There were 0 combat deaths in Afghanistan, 0, from February 2020 until today, when at least 12 U.S. Marines were killed. Apparently, at least a dozen more are injured, according to the information that is now leaking out. The blast at the Abbey Gate entrance at Kabul airport left at least a dozen more Marines injured. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby confirmed the deaths of the Marines in a statement. Here's the pathetic statement from your United States Pentagon, quote, "We can confirm that a number of U.S. service members were killed in today's complex attack at Kabul airport. A number of others are being treated for wounds. We also know that a number of Afghans fell victim to this heinous attack." By the way, how many? Current total death count in this attack, at least 60. At least 60. 140 wounded. The images that are coming out from Afghanistan are devastating, especially because we have video from yesterday showing exactly where this bombing happened, an enormously crowded area just outside the airport. The Taliban had basically been bottlenecking everybody. People couldn't get through. People were showing up to the airport because the United States was making no provision to get people out. So people were just showing up, hoping to escape the clutches of the Taliban. The Taliban bottlenecked all of them, and now ISIS came in and blew up a couple of human beings, along with 60 other human beings. According to the Pentagon, we also know a number of Afghans fell victim to this heinous attack. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the loved ones and teammates of all those killed and injured. Oh, well, thoughts and prayers. But remember, every time there is a shooting in the United States and people on the right say that their thoughts and prayers go out to people who have been harmed. Well, now the Pentagon, which is not a thoughts and prayers machine. The Pentagon is a kill people and break things machine, which has been completely and utterly hamstrung by the Biden administration, has been relegated to thoughts and prayers language. Total casualties are now apparently more than 60. It includes Afghan civilians and an infant. We still don't have any idea as to how many Americans were in that crowd. We don't know yet. So that is the situation on the ground at the moment. Surgeons will be working into the night, said Margot Puntin, the charity's manager in Afghanistan. This would be a charity that is working in Afghanistan to try and deal with the wounded, is according to the Associated Press. The wounded overflowed the triage zone into the physiotherapy area. More beds were being added. Even as the area was hit, evacuation flights continued to take off from Kabul airport. Adam Khan was waiting nearby when he saw the first explosion outside what's known as the Abbey Gate. He said several people appeared to have been killed or wounded, including some who were maimed. The second blast was at or near Baron Hotel, where many people, including Afghans, Britons, and Americans, were told to gather in recent days before heading to the airport for evacuation. A former Royal Marine who runs an animal shelter in Afghanistan says he and his staff were caught up in the aftermath of the blast near the airport. He said, all of a sudden we heard gunshots and our vehicle was targeted. Had our driver not turned around, he would have been shot in the head by a man with an AK-47. Already, some countries have ended their evacuations and begun to withdraw their soldiers and diplomats. The Taliban have insisted troops must be cut out of America's self-imposed deadline of August 31st, and the evacuations must end by then too. And because they are now running the entire effort, the Biden administration has complied in defiance of our European allies. There are at least 15 who have been wounded, by the way, now in the suicide attack at the Kabul airport. 12 dead. That's according to the latest at Fox News, and this stuff is coming in moment by moment. Our terrible Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, he put out a statement, quote, "On behalf of the men and women of the Department of Defense, I express my deepest condolences to the loved ones and teammates of all those killed and wounded in Kabul today. Terrorists took their lives at the very moment these troops were trying to save the lives of others. We mourn their loss, we will treat their wounds, and we will support their families in what will, most assuredly, be devastating grief. But we will not be dissuaded from the task at hand. To do anything less, especially now, would dishonor the purpose and sacrifice these men and women have rendered our country and the people of Afghanistan." I noticed that there's nothing in there about killing the people who organized this, or doing anything, actually, about the people who organized this. So it's pretty obvious that nothing is going to happen. We are awaiting some sort of comment from the Biden administration. The Pentagon is supposed to be holding a press conference any moment now. When they do, we will see what they have to say. Apparently, the Pentagon press conference, we have General McKenzie over there. He's saying that the U.S. will go after those who carried out today's lethal attacks that killed at least 12 Americans. Also, the head of U.S. CENTCOM, that'd be General McKenzie, just said they are reaching out to the Taliban to see if they can protect us. So this is going well, really, really well. We're also waiting for the President of the United States to join us after his nap. As far as the Americans getting out, it is unlikely at this point that Americans are going to be allowed out. According to Liz Sly, a Washington Post Beirut bureau chief covering Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and beyond, she tweeted out earlier today, quote, "The Kabul airport attack has nixed hopes of evacuation for the last thousands still hoping to make it out. I'm hearing the U.S. military is sealing shut the airport gates. Apparently they're welding them, according to multiple reports. The casualty numbers are growing by the minute. A tragedy piled on a tragedy. So we're going to leave probably 1,000 people there minimum." Alex Thompson, White House reporter for Politico, says the same thing, quote, "Increasingly, looking like the U.S. will end up leaving behind over 1,000 American citizens and many times as many Afghans who assisted the United States. Will have to try to evacuate them in different ways after August 31st without U.S. troop presence." So you ask the question, how are we going to do that? They don't have assets on the ground anymore because the Taliban killed all the assets. So what are we going to do? Presumably the answer will be, you wait for it, bribery. And so it's likely that this will end up being us giving money to the Taliban. By the way, the Taliban, for their part, are taking no responsibility for this. Remember, Joe Biden had been relying on them for security. Right? He'd been saying they were the ones who were going to provide security so that our people could get to the airport. And now it turns out that the Taliban looks like let ISIS through, and ISIS just blew some people up. The Taliban say the terror attack, quote, took place in an area where U.S. forces are responsible for security. They're blaming Joe Biden for the attack. All right, we're going to go live to the Pentagon where General Kenneth McKenzie, the U.S. CENTCOM commander, is speaking to the press.
You've been out there, are very familiar with, that are pretty effective against these kinds of attack. We are well positioned around the boundary of the airfield, and we feel that we would be in good shape should that kind of attack occur. We also know they aim to get a vehicle-borne suicide attack in if they can, from a small vehicle to a large vehicle. They're working all those options. And then we've just seen their ability to deliver a walk-in, a vest-wearing suicide attacker. All of those things we look at. Now, the other thing we do is we share versions of this information with the Taliban so that they can actually do some searching out there for us. And we believe that some attacks have been thwarted by them. Again, we've been doing this we've been doing this since the 14th. This is an attack that's been carried out. We believe it's possible that others have been thwarted. We cut down the information we give the Taliban. They don't get the full range of information we have, but we give them enough to act in time and space to try to prevent these attacks. The other thing we try to do is we try to push out the boundary even further so that we don't get large crowds massing at the gate. Clearly, at Abbey Gate today, we had a larger crowd there than we would like, which goes to show you that the system is not perfect. But we have gained large elements of standoff at other gates, and we want to keep that kind of standoff in place. As you know, standoff for attacks like this is always the best defense. Unfortunately, we just don't have the opportunity, given the geography of the ground that we're on, to always gain that kind of standoff. So let me close up your question by saying we take the threat of these attacks very seriously. We're working them very hard. We're doing a variety of things. We got, as you know, we have AH-64 attack helicopters on the ground that we're flying to take a look. They have very good thermal and optical imaging systems. We got aircraft overhead that also have very good imaging systems. We have unmanned aircraft, MQ-9s, that have the ability to look. All of these systems are being applied in defense of the airfield, all of it on a continual basis, all of them vectored by the intelligence that we receive, and then we also use the Taliban as a tool to protect us as much as possible.
I'm going to go to the phone, so I haven't done that yet. Alex Horton, Washington Post. Alex, you there?
Yep, just unmuting. Hey, Gerald, this is Alex Horton with the Washington Post. Thanks for doing this. Can you give us a sense of where you are in casualty notification for these folks on the ground? How long do you expect it to take?
More from the situation over at the Pentagon in just one moment. You're hearing from General Kenneth McKenzie, who's the head of U.S. CENTCOM, who's been given an impossible task because the Biden administration decided, like morons, because they are in fact morons, they decided what would be a great idea is to reduce the American footprint down to Kabul Air Base, the airport, as opposed to Bagram Air Base, which is a much larger, more defensible footprint. They decided to do this. And so now, you just heard it, General Kenneth McKenzie saying we are relying on the Taliban to provide us security. Don't worry, they're going to stop the terrorists. Now, if only we had some sort of indicator historically as to whether we could trust the Taliban to stop terrorism. If only we had, what if, historically speaking, of course, the Taliban had housed terrorists and those terrorists had killed upward of 3,000 Americans in the United States on September 11th. And then we had said, why don't you turn those people over? And they had said no. And then we had completely destroyed their regime. And now we welcome them back. And now we're surprised that they didn't actually stop the terrorism at the gates. Because we're stupid. Because we're unbelievable. And by we, I mean the Biden administration. They're unbelievably stupid. In just a second, I'm going to remind you of what the vaunted General Mark Milley, very concerned about white rage, had to say about why we abandoned Bagram Air Base, which was the worst decision of this entire evacuation. We'll get to that in just 1 second. First, let me remind you that if you haven't refied your mortgage, you're missing out. Time is running out on these historically low mortgage rates. Don't miss your chance to save up to $1,000 a month. It takes just a 10-minute call to the American Financing, folks, America's home for home loans. Take advantage of a free loan review from a salary-based mortgage consultant, meaning no pressure, no obligation, no upfront or hidden fees. Just a simple conversation around which program can fit your budget better. Because rates are still near all-time lows, there's a good chance you can benefit without adding years to your loan. That's right, you can choose any term 10 years and over, so you're not wasting money on years you don't need. So what are you waiting for? You can pre-qualify for free, and you may be able to postpone 2 payments when you call 866-721-3300. That's 866-721-3300, or visit AmericanFinancing.net. NMLS 182334, NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Go check them out right now. If you haven't looked at refining your home mortgage, you're missing out. That's probably your biggest monthly bill. Why not get that lowered? You absolutely should. If you can, go check them out right now. AmericanFinancing.net. Give them a call at 866-721-3300. That's 866-721-3300. Alrighty, coming up, we'll remind you exactly why we abandoned Bagram Air Base and continue to bring you the latest on a disastrous day in Afghanistan. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So let me just get this straight. We have 12 killed in action. This is the deadliest day for American troops in Afghanistan since 2011 and the second deadliest day since 2005. And apparently, the Pentagon says that we were relying on the Taliban to do initial searches for explosives and weapons on people trying to get into Kabul airport before they reached the American perimeter. Now, if only we had some evidence of what it is that the Taliban do when we trust them to stop terrorism before. Say, a couple of giant collapsed towers in the middle of New York City and a plane hitting the Pentagon and another plane going down in a field in Pennsylvania. That was literally the last time we trust the Taliban to stop terrorism. And shockingly, it didn't work this time either. Who could have foreseen such a thing? Who could have foreseen such a thing? Really amazing, amazing stuff. Also, a quick reminder, the reason that we decided to abandon Bagram Air Base is because, once again, we are unbelievably stupid. Okay, according to General Mark Milley, who you'll recall is extremely concerned with the major problem in America of white rage, here's what he had to say about this. Remember, if we had had Bagram Air Base, that provides a broader security perimeter, we should have left enough troops on the ground to at least effectuate the evacuation. Here's what Milley had to say. This was actually back in earlier August, like a week and a half ago. Quote, securing Bagram is a significant level of military effort and forces, and it would also require external support from the Afghan security forces. Our task, given to us at that time, our task was to protect the embassy in order for the embassy personnel to continue to function with their consulate services and all that. If we were to keep both Bagram and the embassy going, that would be a significant number of military forces that would have exceeded what we had, or stayed the same or exceeded what we had. So you had to collapse one or the other. A decision was made. The proposal was made from the CENTCOM commander and the commander on the ground, Scotty Miller, to go ahead and collapse Bagram. That was all briefed and approved. And we estimated that the risk of going out of KIA and the risk of going out of Bagram are about the same. So going out of KIA was estimated to be the better tactical solution, in accordance with the mission set we were given, and in accordance with getting the troops down to a 600 to 700 number. Okay, so in other words, Joe Biden said, I want less than 1,000 troops there. And the military said to him, if we do that, we have to give up either Bagram or the embassy. And Joe Biden said, figure it out. And they said, okay, we recommend giving up Bagram. And that is how we ended up trying to evacuate people from a one-horse town, the Kabul International Airport, which has one runway and no protected gates. That is how we ended up in this situation. Because once again, Joe Biden is a fool. He is a fool. He is a simpleton. By the way, General McKenzie just said, we thought this would happen sooner or later. Oh, did you? Well, then what could we have done to prevent it? It's all part of the plan, guys. As long as it's all part of the plan, doesn't matter. By the way, General McKenzie also has just said that he does not know whether the Taliban let it happen. He literally just said that a moment ago. He was asked, did the Taliban allow this to happen since they were the ones in charge of security? This is the head of CENTCOM. And he said, quote, as to whether or not they let it happen, I don't know. Why don't we check in on General McKenzie and see what he is talking about now?
Religiously. Throughout the day and throughout the night as we conduct operations. Because really, the aircraft, the only way we're going to get people out of there. So we are keenly sensitive threats to our aircraft.
Okay, we're going to take one more question. I'm sorry, guys, we got to keep moving. We're going to take one more question and then give the general a chance to close out. Idris?
Sure, General, I know it's still early, but at this moment in time, how do you believe the suicide bombers made it through several checkpoints, whether it was Taliban or Afghan forces, to the Marines? Do you believe it was a failure, or they were able to somehow evade them and make it to the Marines?
Well, clearly, if they were able to get up to the Marines at the screening at the entry point of the base, there's a failure somewhere. It was a failure by, the Taliban operate with varying degrees of competence. Some of those guys are very scrupulously good. Some of them are not. I just don't know the answer to that question. But we will. You can be assured we're going to continue to take a look at it and try to make all our practices better as we go forward.
Okay, General, sir, we're going to let the general close out. General, sir, for any closing thoughts you might have, sir.
Hey, John, thanks. Again, I would just like to say today's a hard day, but the thing I come back to is the remarkable professionalism that the force on the ground is showing. As I've noted before, ultimately at these screening points in particular, you got to get very up close and personal to the people that you're bringing out. There's no way to do that safely from a distance. And we should all just bear in mind that we've been doing it for well over a week. We brought 104,000 people out. That's a tremendous number of contacts that every individual Marine, soldier, or sailor has had to have as we bring people aboard the airfield. It's a very heavy heart, that I do this conversation with you today. Nobody feels it more than me or the other members of the chain of command. We'll do everything we can to improve our practices there, to make sure it's as safe as possible for our folks on the ground that are doing this dirty, dangerous work. John, thanks very much.
Thank you, General. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
John, will you take a couple questions?
No, that's going to be the end of it.
Okay, well, that's it. So, do you know a lot more than you did before? Nope. All we know is that the Taliban didn't do their job screening terrorists. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? What an impossibility. And obviously, no one is questioning the professionalism of the troops on the ground. What we're questioning is the fact that they have been given an undoable mission by this dumbass administration, by this administration more committed to pleasing Joe Biden than to actually saving Americans on the ground. There are 1,000 Americans in Kabul, minimum, who ain't getting out. Okay, that's being freely admitted now by everybody. There are tens of thousands of people, translators for the American military, people who worked for American companies, through American contractors, who ain't getting out. Their families ain't getting out. Okay, all those people are going to get stuck there because Joe Biden is a buffoon, because this administration is a joke. But it's a sick joke. And we're still waiting to hear from the President of the United States, who continues to presumably drink and Shure and watch Matlock and enjoy his life. And he's eating chocolate chip today. That's the really important thing to remember, is that America's back, baby, better than ever. Can't you feel the warmth for America out there? Can't you feel how America's respect has been earned back by President Joe Biden and his strategy to withdraw from Afghanistan for no discernible reason whatsoever? Remember, there were 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan at the beginning of this year. We hadn't had a combat casualty since February 2020. Now the deadliest day since 2005. All right, stick around in just a moment. We'll be joined by Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska to discuss all of this. Is The Ben Shapiro Show. back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. It is a very, very dark day for America. A couple of suicide bombers nearly simultaneously setting off their bombs near Kabul airport, killing at least 12 U.S. service members. Many more are injured, at least 60 total dead, another 140 injured. Joining us on the line to discuss, Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska. Senator Sasse, thanks for joining us on what is a really, really rough day.
Yeah, Ben, thanks for the invite. It is a terrible day for America.
So let's talk about what went wrong here. I mean, it is obvious that the strategy here was no strategy. According to CENTCOM, and we just played some of the press briefing they were doing, we are now relying on the Taliban to provide security for us. We had relied on the Taliban to apparently pre-screen people for suicide vests. Shockingly, I mean, unbelievably, the Taliban, they actually don't care, apparently, or at least we don't know if they care, about stopping actual terrorism. If only we'd had an indicator of that, like, say, 20 years ago when 2 giant towers in New York were brought down by people harbored by the Taliban.
Yeah, the failures here just mount failure upon failure upon failure. But first, let's just say that our hearts go out to the servicemen and women and their families. Obviously, there are a lot of Marines families on the verge of getting some horrible, horrible news. So our prayers go to all people who are in harm's way on behalf of American freedom. So, the administration has made just a crazy number of bizarrely naive moves. So I think for decades and decades in military strategy classes, people are going to talk about the abandonment of Bagram base as just one of the stupidest blunders in all of U.S. history. It made no sense. And so the administration is now repeatedly relying on the good graces, I say in scare quotes, of the Taliban, who are folks who are going door to door in regional provinces right now trying to collect 12-year-old girls to be brides of their soldiers. These are rapists. These are terrorists. These are people who provided safe harbor for multiple other terror organizations. And the administration continually says these weak things about relying on the mercy and the kindness and the charity of the Taliban. It is a ridiculous strategy.
It's utterly humiliating for the most powerful military in the history of the world, the most powerful country in the history of the world, to basically be bowing to the whims of a bunch of 8th century terrorists, barbarians, who are now armed with billions and like tens of billions of dollars of American equipment, including very sophisticated helicopters. They all have night vision goggles now. 16,000 pairs of night vision goggles apparently are now in the hands of the Taliban. And of course, the people providing security inside Kabul itself are the wonderful members of the Haqqani network, which is an al-Qaeda offshoot and which is labeled a terrorist organization by every civilized country on earth. They're the people who are supposedly providing security inside Afghanistan right now. Senator Sasse, what are you hearing about the Americans who remain? So we know that there are at least 1,000 Americans who are still on the ground in Kabul. My guess is it's many, many more people than that. The administration started off this whole debacle by saying we were going to get out all of American allies who wanted to get out, that all Americans who wanted to get out would get out, green card holders would get out. Now it appears we're going to leave at least 1,000 American citizens on the ground in Kabul. It appears that we are going to leave many more green card holders in Afghanistan more broadly, and perhaps hundreds of thousands of people who joined us in the war against the Taliban are going to be left on the ground to the tender mercies of the Taliban, who are now our erstwhile allies in fighting terror.
Yeah, I think that's right, Ben. It's worth distinguishing probably between what we do and don't know about the numbers and what the strategic options are that face the commander-in-chief right now. And it's not very difficult to figure out that the first thing he needs to do is pivot against the weakness of his retreat and make clear to the Taliban that they don't control a countdown clock on American lives. So you've seen Secretary Blinken over the course of the last 36 or 48 hours and his spokespeople go out and use a whole range of numbers bouncing around anywhere between 500 and 4,000 Americans left. Some of those distinctions are between passport holders versus green card holders, and some of those distinctions are about whether or not they're counting only the individual who's named on the sort of evacuate paperwork versus their family as well. But the number is surely way, way, way above 500. It's not clear if 4,000 is the right number or not. But the administration is obviously the gang who can't shoot straight. And they've even tried their hand to see if the media would carry the message last night of beginning to blame the American people who are there for not having gotten out earlier. We've seen this administration bounce around between who they blame from Americans on the ground in the country, the previous administration, and obviously I've been clear that I think negotiating with the Taliban was always a terrible idea, but they blamed the Afghan security forces, including some Afghan security forces who are still fighting at the border of the airport, trying to secure certain things. And now they're thinking about potentially trying to blame Americans who haven't left yet, when the administration themselves has refused to make an unequivocal commitment that they will stay until every American is out. And so when they don't make that pledge, what they're saying to the Taliban, yet again, is that the administration is willing to be weak. They are willing to leave Americans behind. They've regularly talked about things in their press briefings 3-4 days ago, claiming that there were no challenges at the checkpoints to get to the airport. That was never true. Americans have been harassed. Some of our close allies who fought on behalf of Americans against the common enemy that is the Taliban, some of these people have been arrested and tortured at checkpoints. We know all of the Afghan allies are basically being filmed at these checkpoints so they can be on the hit list later for if they're not evacuated by the U.S. But all that's just in Kabul proper. There are 34 regions in this country, and many of the Americans are far beyond Kabul and have no safe pathway into the airport. So what faces the administration, what faces President Biden, is a very clear choice. Do you declare the deadline dead, and do you announce that you are going to guarantee that Americans can get out? That will require either pushing the perimeter well beyond Karzai Airport to make sure that there aren't RPG missile opportunities to take down a plane on the runway or at takeoff or at landing when it returns. Do you either push out the perimeter around Karzai, or do you retake Bagram Air Force Base? Absent one of those two choices, the administration is basically deciding to leave this in a hostage situation where there will be Americans left behind. There is no conceivable argument for abandoning Americans. The president has to act like the commander-in-chief and show more strength, because his weakness is inviting more bloodshed.
We're speaking to Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska. Senator Sasse, as I'm sure you're aware, there was a report earlier today from Politico, Lara Seligman reporting, that the United States actually gave the Taliban a list of names of U.S. citizens, green card holders, and Afghan allies to grant entry into the outer perimeter of the city's airport. So in order to allow them to supposedly provide security for these people, we just gave them a kill list. We gave them a list of all the people who we wanted to get out. They've already said, the Taliban, they're not allowing any more Afghans out. So we just gave them a giant list of people who worked with us, so now they can just go directly to their homes and kill them. This is so unbelievably irresponsible. I mean, there's blood on the hands of the people who created that particular policy.
There have been so many moves this administration has made that whenever there's a choice, they seem to take the choice, which is show the greatest possible weakness and hope that the Taliban will somehow be people who are good on their word and will show mercy. And at every point, we know that the Taliban and their allies, again, we can go through all of them. They obviously have many fights with ISIS-K, but from ISIS-K to the Khani network to Al-Qaeda proper to Al-Qaeda spinoffs and offshoots, what the Taliban has made clear is that they love the idea of America being humiliated. When we made our commitment, not just to all these Americans, so obviously that's the top of the list, but to these 60 to 80,000 people who fought alongside us. We're talking about translators. We're talking about drivers. We're talking about people who fought with us against a common enemy so that we wouldn't have another 9/11 style attack at home. We were taking the fight to them, and we were very successful at decapitating terror organizations. There are a whole bunch of dudes who are bin Laden wannabes whose names are not household names in America, precisely because they never took down a World Trade Center, because we successfully decapitated many of these organizations. And across those 5 different terror groups, this jihadi planning ground, if you will, the one thing we know is that the Taliban, the organization that controlled most of Afghanistan, but not all of it, from 1996 to 2001, was more than willing to grant terror training sanctuaries all over parts of their country that were difficult to control or that they winked at the actual planning of these terror groups. And I think what we're going to see is a return of Afghanistan as the jihadi training ground capital of the globe. You cannot leave any Americans behind enemy lines in this terror training capital of the world. And right now, the Biden administration has been willing to criticize and blame everybody under the sun, except the Taliban. Where does the administration ever talk honestly about who the Taliban is? They never do. They say this nonsense, implying that the Taliban is going through an existential crisis, They're going through an identity crisis. They're reinventing themselves. They want to be respected in French restaurants across Europe. They probably have a climate plan somewhere, the administration is going to tell us. When the reality is they don't have the existential identity crisis. This administration is leading America into an existential identity crisis. A superpower has to behave like a superpower. And if you behave this weakly, and if you are in constant retreat, they sense that blood and they think there are no consequences to sending people in to blow up Americans.
You know, Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska. Senator, one of the things that I think people ought to keep their eye on as well is not only the reconstitution of Afghanistan as a terrorist state. We will have no bases in Afghanistan when all of this is over. Joe Biden suggested that there was no al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. That was a lie. He turned his back on a reporter when the reporter asked about ISIS in Afghanistan. ISIS in Afghanistan has just killed 12 American soldiers. There are other geopolitical consequences to this. Our enemies are on the move. China's going to make a deal with the Taliban. Russia is going to make a deal with the Taliban. Both of those countries are going to move toward enemies on other shores. They're going to start moving toward Taiwan in China. They've made that very clear. Russia's looking with envious eyes at Latvia and Estonia. And this administration is basically banking the American people are going to forget about this. It's going to be hard for the American people to forget about this when, again, there are thousands of Americans and American allies stuck on the ground behind enemy lines. And the administration says that their plan for beyond August 31st is basically either unspecified missions, for which we have very few options, or the kindness of the Taliban, which basically just means bribery, doesn't it?
I'm afraid that is what they really mean, that's their code. I have to fall in about 90 seconds, Ben, but I want to speak to the point you just made about the global implications of this, and in particular, since you mentioned Taiwan. The one thing we know is that in the Obama administration, when the red line was drawn in Syria and then that red line wasn't enforced, ISIS in the form that we know it is basically a byproduct of that kind of weakness in the administration's Middle Eastern strategy against terrorism in the past, the Obama administration at that point. The one thing we know about the next 10 plus years in this country from a national security standpoint is that the biggest existential threat we actually face, besides just the weakness that we're seeing on display right now, is the long-term technology race against the Chinese Communist Party. And right now, these individuals to whom we've made commitments in Afghanistan matter as individuals. Again, just make sure your listeners are all level set on this. There are 32 million people in Afghanistan. The people to whom we've made particular commitments are about 60 to 80,000 people. So it's a tiny, tiny number. They all matter as humans who are created in God's image with dignity, but it also matters as a matter of U.S. national moral standing, pride, and commitment. Because what Beijing is doing is they are deploying their diplomats all over the globe right now and saying, there's eventually going to be a standoff over Taiwan. Would you really want to be with Taiwan and the United States when you see that this is how the United States treats our allies? And I think it's important for our listeners to understand as well that Taiwan is a critical part of the supply chain for the entire U.S. economy because of how many chips are manufactured there. Taiwan matters in its own right because of the dignity of those people and because they've been trying to resist the oppressive communist regime coming out of Beijing. But it's also a realist interest to the United States geopolitically and economically for the median middle-class family in the U.S. And Beijing is out there openly mocking us, mocking Biden and Vice President Harris in particular, but mocking all of the American people, saying the way the U.S. is being humiliated in Afghanistan should be a sign to other countries, don't trust America. That is what Beijing is saying all over the globe. And this administration is going to see all 5 of the major fronts on the earth get more complicated. When we think about the big national security challenges we face, they are China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and a grab bag of jihadis. And by being weak in the face of jihad, the administration has weakened us on all 4 other fronts as well, because it's harder to have allies if they don't think you can trust you. And it's harder to have allies if they don't think your enemies will fear you. And that's the legacy of this administration right now.
Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska, appreciate your time. I know it's a horrifying and busy day for you, so I appreciate you taking the time out to discuss.
Thanks, Ben.
All righty, coming up, we have the latest updates. We now have Ina Ruffini, CBS News correspondent, reporting that there's been another explosion outside Hamid Karzai International Airport, apparently the largest one yet. People are describing a booming that is much larger than the boom that they heard earlier today with regard to both of the other suicide bombings. We'll bring you the latest on that in just 1 second. First, your reminder that if you haven't refinanced your mortgage, you probably should. Okay, that's just the reality. Your biggest monthly bill is your mortgage. You should make sure that you have refinanced your mortgage and ensured that you actually have the lowest possible rate. Because if you haven't, then you're making yourself a very large-scale mistake. Time is running out on those mortgage rates. It takes a 10-minute call to American Financing, America's home for home loans. Take advantage of a free loan review from a salary-based mortgage consultant, meaning no pressure, no obligation, no upfront or hidden fees. Just a simple conversation around which program can fit your budget better. Because rates are still near all-time lows, there's a good chance you can benefit without adding years to your loan, which means you can choose any term, 10 years and over, so you're not wasting money on years you don't need. What exactly are you waiting for? You can pre-qualify for free, and you might be able to postpone 2 payments when you call 866-721-3300. That's 866-721-3300, or visit AmericanFinancing.net, NMLS 182334, NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Go check them out right now. That's AmericanFinancing.net, 866-721-3300, 866-721-3300. Alrighty, coming up, we'll bring you the latest on this horrible day for the United States of America. Again, more explosions being heard in Kabul this evening. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So another huge blast has been heard in Kabul, according to the staff of the Agence France Presse. We've heard that confirmed from reporters over at CBS News and NBC News as well. So we will await all news on what exactly is going on over there. It's been a bloody and violent day over in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Politico is reporting that the United States provided the Taliban with names of Americans and Afghan allies to evacuate. How could this go wrong? I mean, we trusted the Taliban with security, and somehow, a suicide bomber made it all the way to right in front of American soldiers and proceeded to kill 12 of them and wound another dozen. So why wouldn't we trust these people with a giant list of everyone we want to get out of the country? According to Politico, U.S. officials in Kabul gave the Taliban a list of names of American citizens, green card holders, and Afghan allies to grant entry into the militant-controlled outer perimeter of the city's airport, a choice that's prompted outrage behind the scenes from lawmakers and military officials. The move, detailed to Politico by 3 U.S. and congressional officials, was designed to expedite the evacuation of tens of thousands of people from Afghanistan, as chaos erupted in Afghanistan's capital city last week after the Taliban seized control. It also came as the Biden administration has been relying on the Taliban for security outside the airport. But the decision to provide specific names to the Taliban, which has a history of brutally murdering Afghans who collaborated with the United States and other coalition forces during the conflict, has angered lawmakers and military officials. Basically, they just put all those Afghans on a kill list, said one defense official, who, like others, spoke on condition of anonymity. It's just appalling and shocking, makes you feel unclean. A spokesperson for CENTCOM declined to comment, of course, because CENTCOM said today, we are relying on the Afghan Taliban to provide us security at the airport. And when asked about whether they allowed ISIS through to conduct today's operations, CENTCOM said, yeah, maybe. We don't know. But what else are we going to do? You mean we, push out and actually provide security for the people trying to get in? Instead, we are welding the gates shut at Kabul International Airport, and this effort is effectively overstranding hundreds, if not thousands, of American citizens in Kabul, thousands of green card holders in Kabul, and hundreds of thousands of Afghans in Afghanistan. The issue came up during a classified briefing on Capitol Hill earlier this week, which turned contentious, according to Politico, after top Biden administration officials defended their close coordination with the Taliban. Biden officials contended it was the best way to keep Americans and Afghans safe and prevent a shooting war between Taliban fighters and the thousands of U.S. troops stationed at the airport. What would have been great is if we hadn't surrendered the country. That probably would have been more useful, probably. After the fall of Kabul, the joint U.S. military and diplomatic coordination team at the airport provided the Taliban with a list of people the U.S. aimed to evacuate. Those names included Afghans who served alongside the United States during the 20-year war and sought special immigrant visas to America. U.S. citizens, dual nationals, and lawful permanent residents were also listed. One U.S. official said they had to do it because of the security situation the White House created by allowing the Taliban to control everything outside the airport. Bring you more on this unbelievable story in just 1 second. First, your reminder, you should protect your online activity. There are just too many people who are seeking your data, from hackers to your ISP who can actually package your data and then resell it for money. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, hotels, airports, basically any network that's not your own, your online data is not secured. Any hacker on the same network can gain access to and steal your personal data, passwords, financial details, you name it. That's why I recommend ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so hackers can't steal your valuable data. You just fire up the app, you click one button to get protected. And ExpressVPN works on all your devices, so you can stay secure on the go. So why wouldn't you secure your data if you have the opportunity to do so? I do. With one click of a button, I can install with another click. ExpressVPN is now running on my computer. Secure your online data today at expressvpn.com/Ben. Get 3 extra months for free. That's expressvpn.com/Ben, expressvpn.com/Ben. Get 3 extra months for free when you check out expressvpn.com/Ben and protect your internet activity today. Okay, so as Politico continues, they say, after thousands of visa applicants arrived at the airport, overwhelming the capacity of the United States to process them, the State Department changed course. They asked applicants not to come to the airport. Instead, they requested they wait until they were cleared for entry. From then on, the list fed to the Taliban didn't include those Afghan names. Oh, oopsie. Maybe the Taliban lost it or something. As of August 25th, only U.S. passport and green card holders were being accepted as eligible for evacuation. So if you have a special immigrant visa, as of yesterday, you're absolutely boned. You're stuck there at the mercy of the Taliban, who have your name. The Taliban has gone door to door in search of Afghan interpreters and others who helped U.S. and Western forces. In written and verbal communications, General Frank McKenzie, commander of U.S. CENTCOM, and Rear Admiral Peter Vasily, head of U.S. forces on the ground in Afghanistan, have referred to the Taliban as, quote, our Afghan partners. What partners they are. What partners they are. I mean, what an excellent showing they have made today. Especially since the explosions continue. This was the deadliest day in American history in Afghanistan since 2011. The irresponsibility of handing over a giant list to the people who are going to kill those people is pretty astonishing. Joe Biden is addressing the nation at 5 p.m. tonight Eastern time. So in approximately an hour or so, the President of the United States will be doing a national address. He is not, however, going to answer any questions. Jen Psaki will then do a briefing at 5:45. So Joe Biden will presumably stroll out around 5:30 or so, as is his wont. He will say a few things that make no sense. He will then wander off as people shout questions to him about what he's going to do, and then Jen Psaki will come out and lie to you. Alrighty, coming up, we're going to bring you more on what's going on the ground. 12 American Marines dead, many more wounded. This is the Ben Shapiro Show.